car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
And welcome to the attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. I want to let you know that right now, someone at Hollis Wright is standing by to answer your calls. When we start the calls, when we start the show, they're on the phone taking your call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That call is free and it is confidential. We're talking about when animals attack. It's something we've talked about before, but we always got some new information.
Absolutely. We've done shows on this before, and it's actually a pretty meaningful part of our practice at Hollis Wright in terms of looking at all of the different areas of personal injury incidents that we handle. We do handle quite a bit of dog incidents, and I say dog incidents, I know we talk in terms of dog bites and dog attacks, but we handle quite a few cases where people are injured, not through some type of bite or attack, but just maybe playfulness or incidental contact that a big dog has with an individual where they get injured. And so it's really more appropriately termed dog incidents. And we've got no better guest than Michael Eldridge, my partner at Hollis Wright, here today with us to kind of unpack this topic. Michael, we appreciate you joining us here.
Yeah. Appreciate being here.
Yeah. So obviously you've handled these cases in the past. All our lawyers at the firm have handled these types of cases, but let's get into the details a little bit. So I think the jumping off point should always be if somebody is attacked, bitten, or hurt by an animal, what should be sort of their first response?
Well, it's honestly not much different than what I tell people that are involved in car accidents or just regular personal injuries, which is first take care of yourself, right? If you're attacked by a dog and you suffered puncture wounds or lacerations or other injuries from falling, like you said, you need medical treatment. That's what you need to do, is take care of yourself. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't do all the other things that we're going to talk about. And a lot of times when we're talking about dog bites and these puncture wounds, even if the dog is up to date on their rabies shots, which we hope everyone that is a dog owner makes sure that their dogs are always up to date, you can still get infections. You may have to get shots to make sure that you don't get rabies. High doses of antibiotics, which there can always be, depending on the individual complications with that. We see a lot of different things that can result not just from tearing and scarring and stitches that have to do with these dog bites. So take care of yourself. And then after that, from the standpoint of whether or not there is a claim to be reimbursed for your injuries, just like a car accident, you're never going to be able to recreate those pictures, what your injuries look like. So you want to document as much as you can. And then from there, and we'll discuss this in a minute, is you're going to want to talk to someone who's actually dealt with these dog bite cases, because it's not as simple as someone else's dog bit me, so now I've got a viable cause of action. There's actually multiple laws that span multiple, from a statutory, common law standpoint and criminal standpoint, that could all play a factor for someone to evaluate.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions we always get during these types of shows involving dog attacks or dog bites is, should I call the police? Should I call animal control? That they're always wondering, like, should I call law enforcement? What advice would you give in that regard?
I think it probably depends on the circumstances, but generally, yes. That's the reason animal control is there. That's the reason that the police are there, is to report these things. And when we look at the criminal laws, there's actually, from a court standpoint, they take these police reports based on the type of dog, whether the dog was roaming free, whether the dog owner didn't take the proper precautions in order to keep them either in a fence or in a yard. And so all of those things can matter, but from the concern of having a civil case, Carter, as you know, insurance companies, and we'll talk about homeowners insurance and how it covers this, they like those reports, and they like for it to be reported just like a car accident. And so having all of that information is very, very important. And that's one of the purposes of animal control and the police.
Yeah.
And I think he went down the road that I wanted to go and talk about, is that you started going down this road when you start talking about whether the dog was confined in a space. It's not cut and dry who's responsible or who's liable if I'm bitten by a dog, right?
Well, generally, you're going to have to figure out who the dog owner is and who's responsible. But I'll tell you, Art, we actually had a situation. I had a case with these two pit bulls where they were owned by a son who lived in a different city. He was traveling to where his parents were and leaving the dogs with them and then going on vacation. And so at that point, there's a question of whether or not the parents or the people who are responsible for those dogs, because they have homeowners policies. And those dogs started roaming free in Prattville, Alabama, and attacked a lady that was walking around in her neighborhood and caused very serious injuries. So now you're right, the circumstances matter in these insurance contracts, both from the son who owned the dogs and the parent who agreed to watch the dogs.
Yeah, the identity of the owner or controller of the dog is paramount, because if you don't know who was in control of the dog or who owned the dog, there's nobody to go after.
Right.
So that's the first step in the process. And then quite frankly, the second step in the process is finding out whether or not that owner or controller of the dog has any type of homeowner's insurance coverage to pay for the judgment. And that's what we do in any case that we have. We're looking for liability insurance coverage. It's very difficult to get a judgment against somebody and actually collect on that judgment. It can become an exercise in futility oftentimes if they don't have insurance to step in, protect them from the mistakes that they made, or for their dog attacking somebody to try and get compensation for our individual clients. So the identification of the owner and controller is always paramount and key. And Michael is right, and this doesn't really just apply to dog incidents. It applies across the board to any personal injury case that is contemporaneous record keeping or record generation is critical. Don't wait a week and a half or 2 weeks before you go to the doctor because you think your injury is going to go away or you think that dog bite will heal on its own, because the insurance companies that we deal with, they will use that delay against you in your claim. And how they will use it against you, well, obviously, Mr. Clay, if your client was really all that injured, they would have gone to the doctor before a week and a half to 2 weeks passed. They're not receptive to this idea that human nature is, let me see if it goes away on its own. So getting to a doctor early on, getting that medical treatment, getting that law enforcement report or reporting it to animal control, all of those things are critically important to successfully navigating a case.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I used to do defense work, and every single one of those insurance companies actually have a term for it, which is called a gap in treatment. And every day that gap gets bigger, they use it against you, right? Because they don't know the personality of the people. And we have a lot of people that genuinely just want to try and tough it out. They may not want to go to the doctor. They may have other things that they're trying to do. And so being able to document these things, especially when you have an acute incident like a dog bite, you've been attacked by a dog, you need this documented from a narrative standpoint. What happened? That's going to be in the medical record. That's going to be in the police report, in the animal control report. Yeah. If the police have that information, they're going to be able to go see if there was any other incidents with this dog that reports before, which could be very, very critical to not only whether or not you have a viable claim, and we'll talk about the one bite rule in a minute, but the value of your claim from a damages standpoint.
Yeah, Art, I know we're about to go to break, but we want to further address your question that you asked a minute ago about it's not cut and dry.
Right.
Because that is absolutely correct. And we want to get into the law in the next segment, kind of unpack that a little bit and address kind of what we have to prove and what people need to be aware of in terms of whether or not they've got a strong or weak case.
Yeah, and we're talking about when animals or when dogs attack. And we know that we love our pets and that dogs don't always attack humans, but sometimes when it does happen, you need someone like Hollis Wright to represent you. Also, Hollis Wright, standing by right now at 1-844-LAW-TALK. Someone from the firm will answer your call. It is a free call. It is a confidential call. No one has to know your call, but they will answer your question for you. We're going to take a break. We'll continue the discussion when we come back right here on The Attorneys.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys. Did you know when you hire Hollis Wright, you are still in charge of your case? Our attorneys at Hollis Wright are client-centered, allowing you to help us control your case and result. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. I'd like to invite you to join Hollis Wright on all social media platforms on X, Instagram, and Facebook, and follow along, and you get some really good information there. Also remind you to give them a call right now, 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free confidential call. Today we're talking about when animals attack and what you really need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And this area of the law can be pretty complicated, to be perfectly honest with you. And this is really why you need to talk to a lawyer if you find yourself in a situation where you were injured as a result of a dog bite or attack, or just any type of dog in general, because you've got a few different laws that you can look to. You've got Alabama statutory law, which are like code sections and statutes that are on the book, passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. Then you've also got what we call common law, which are like general negligence standards, somebody engaged in unreasonable conduct. And then you've also got local leash laws, okay? And all of those laws kind of work together and can be utilized to try and get an individual who was injured compensation for those injuries. And so, Michael, with that background, sort of, what is the jumping off point for you when you're first evaluating sort of the incident? What did the dog do? Those types of things.
Well, and the last thing you said, what did the dog do? And something that Art, you touched on right before we went to break, which is we love our dogs. And I always tell people that this is, when we talk about these dog bite laws and these cases, this is not an attack on dogs.
No.
And in fact, the laws are not an attack on dogs. It is about the conduct and what the duty and what our responsibility as dog owners are, as almost all of us are dog owners. There's, by and large, people have dogs, and there's going to be dogs in your neighborhood, and that's what these laws address. So you talked about the statutory laws that the legislature passes, and there is a statute that was passed by the legislature that has to do, it's a strict, what's called a strict liability law, meaning that if your dog bites someone and there was no provocation, the person didn't do anything to get the dog to bite them, wasn't messing with the dog, then you are strictly liable for their medical damages, any property damage that could be associated with that, what I'm going to call hard damages, right? And then where it gets a little nuanced is when Carter was talking about these common law claims, common law negligence claims. And so when we think about negligence, and people are always surprised, when I explain the dog bite laws, they're like, they've gone this far into it? Well, if you think about negligence, they have to, because a part of negligence is that you've got to have a duty, right? So when you own this dog, you have a duty. Well, what is that duty? Well, if that dog is dangerous, if it has dangerous propensities, then you need to protect people from it. You need to take steps to protect people from that. Well, that's nuanced from dog to dog, from situation to situation. So the first thing they said was, people naturally asked the courts when these cases went up, how do I know if my dog has dangerous propensities? And that's where, and I think it's almost nationwide, we have what's called the one bite rule. Right. So if your dog bites someone and it's the first time they've ever bitten someone and you didn't have notice that they had dangerous propensities, then you get a free pass as the dog owner from a common law negligence standpoint. Now, once that dog has bitten someone, you are on notice of their dangerous propensities. Well, then more cases went up, and the courts started dealing with more of these claims, and in terms of this notice requirement with certain breeds of dogs that we know are inherently vicious animals that can cause great bodily injury. Dogs like pit bulls, right? Doberman pinschers, and there's even some small dogs that we've discussed that have a tendency to bite more than other dogs. They are more prone to cause injury. Now, it may not be grave bodily injury like a pit bull, but Chihuahuas, for example, they are known to bite more than other dogs. That if you own one of those dogs, that the one bite rule does not apply to you. That
you don't get the benefit of it.
Yeah, you should know if you own a pit bull that it has those tendencies to cause injuries and that you've got to take precautions. So we're looking at all of those things. We're looking at the provocation aspect. How did this dog attack happen? Were you just walking down the street and the dog was roaming free? Did you go on the dog's property? Did the dog leave its property? And from a common law standpoint, these negligence claims, all of that matters to determine whether or not the dog owner is liable to you for the dog's conduct, which would include damages, not just for your medical bills or associated property damage. It's going to be the mental anguish, which, by the way, getting attacked by a vicious dog, there is a lot of mental anguish that goes to that. It's going to go to the pain and suffering that you have. If you were out of work, it's going to go to your lost wages. It opens up the amount of damages that a person can get. And so that's kind of the two ways that I explain it to people, that there is the statutory dog bite law,
right,
and then there's the common law that has a statute called the one bite rule.
Now, in support of my partner, Michael Eldridge, I must give the don't shoot the messenger comment here, because there are going to be some pit bull owners out there, Rottweilers, German Shepherds.
Dobermans.
Why are you always picking on these types of dogs? Look, the reality of it is this is just what the law has evolved into over the years. We're just following the law. There are tremendous dogs out there like German Shepherds, pit bulls. A lot of people would say it's not, like Michael said, it's not the dog, it's how they're raised and those types of things. But at the end of the day, if you have any type of dog, you've got a responsibility to protect people from those dogs. And what's interesting about it, as Michael was kind of given the history of this area of law, how these laws came about, and this will kind of tell you how far back we've gone, is we're going back to the milkman days when they used to deliver milk, utility linemen, power company people back in the day. You remember the newspapers where people would bring newspapers to your house? All of those instances in our past where it would bring workers onto our property and they were getting bit by dogs, right? And so a lot of our laws evolved and originated from protection of workers, and ultimately they evolved into protecting people in the general public from getting bit as well.
What are the challenges, though, with the law and enforcing the law?
Well, what I would say is this: the challenges in terms of dog bite cases typically start with that first question of, is there coverage? And because if there is nothing to cover this accident, like Carter said, unfortunately, most of the time, if someone doesn't have homeowners coverage, then they're not going to have the assets, and they're going to be what we call judgment proof, and so the whole process becomes futile. In terms of the defenses, that there are defenses such as the one bite rule, where you've got to a lot of times get into the weeds to start getting veterinary records, getting anything you can in terms of these people's neighbors. Like you have to talk to their witnesses. What do they know about the dog? How have they seen this dog interact with others? Where it becomes this kind of fact-finding discovery about an animal, which is much different than if Carter and I get into a car accident. He's a human being. He can be deposed. These animals cannot. So being able to go and find these things to prove the notice elements become difficult, but there are ways to do it.
Yeah, I know we're about to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about just some tips and advice for dog owners in terms of how they can avoid these types of incidents, how they should be restraining their dog, controlling their dog, to increase the likelihood that their dog never gets involved in these types of incidents.
All right, we'll put a pin right there. I want to remind you also, there's a QR code on your screen. Go ahead and scan that QR code, and you can ask a question to an attorney at Hollis Wright. Also follow on all the social media platforms on X, Instagram, Facebook. Keep in touch with us throughout the week, not just here on this show. We'll take a break and we'll continue When Animals Attack when we come back. Stay with us.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. We love this state and its great people. People that are worth fighting for in their lowest moments. It's what drives our lawyers to do what we do. We're here right now to fight for you. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. There are a couple of numbers you see scrolling on the bottom of your screen. You can use those numbers to text to reach someone at Hollis Wright to ask a question. You can also call 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call. Don't have a lot of time left because they're going to be live throughout the show taking your call, but you can go ahead and do that right now. We're talking about when animals attack, especially dogs.
Yeah, something I've seen in my practice over the years and handled a lot of these cases, and we talked about giving tips and advice to dog owners on what they can do to try and avoid these incidents, is dogs not on a leash. And there are leash laws in almost all cities and communities requiring dogs to be on a leash, but without fail, and I think it has to do with just an owner's mentality about their dog. My dog would never do anything wrong. My dog would never bite anybody. But what they lose sight of is the dog's ability to cause somebody to be injured through situations that have nothing to do with an attack or a bite. And I've handled cases like that where an individual is out jogging with their dog who's not on a leash. And their jogger's like, well, my dog's, he's always by my side. He's a well-trained Labrador Retriever. Well, that's fine, but if an elderly person comes by and your lab knocks up against that person or goes up to them to play with them and knocks them down and they break their leg and have surgery, well, guess what? You're going to be responsible for not maintaining control over that dog and in being in violation of the leash law. And I've had cases like that before. So my main tip or advice would be, if you're going to be out with your dog in a neighborhood or in a park, you should always have them on a leash. Michael, do you have anything to kind of add to that, or any other tips or advice?
Well, first I'll give some personal experience of a mistake I made as a dog owner and one that I learned from. But what I would add to that is, and you touched on it, Carter, you said, my dog would never do that. And that is our instincts, right? That, you know, because we love our animals, and when you love something, you want to protect them. And what I would say is, know your dog. Every type of dog was bred to do a different thing. And so if you've got a golden retriever, for example, that was bred to go run and jump and retrieve things, when they're around children in a park, they're going to be more likely to run and jump and knock those children down. You know, if like we talked about pit bulls, and I'm not picking on pit bulls, they were bred to protect pieces of property and people coming on people's property. So they are very territorial animals. Well, if you've got children coming over to your house, know your dog and don't put them in a bad situation where they may become territorial. They may jump on them based off of the type of dog that they are. I'll give you an example. I had a beagle, and beagles are they are beholden to their nose. And when they smell food and they get on food, they're not going to stop until they get it. And this dog was, and I knew this, was very, very food aggressive. If you accidentally dropped a chicken bone, I know dogs aren't supposed to eat chicken bones. That was Atticus's chicken bone. He was eating it. You don't try to get it. If you gave him food, he was getting in that bowl and he wasn't stopping. Well, I boarded him at the vet one time, and he had a special, because he ate so much, he had a special diet dog food. And they accidentally, the lady who was the girl who feeds them on the weekends, just gave him regular food, saw that she was supposed to give him a special food, tried to take the food away from him, and what did he do? He bit her hand and gave her puncture wounds. And I in that moment said, I could have told y'all, and I could have told y'all, this dog is food aggressive. If he gets on food, you need to leave him alone. I love that dog to death, but I knew about his propensities to be aggressive when there was food. So know your dog and be honest, and don't put them in situations the best that you can to hurt people. And children, people understand it doesn't matter any kind of dog. Children are at the same level of dogs, so their faces are getting in dogs' faces, and that makes them more prone to worse injuries and to spook, these animals because they don't know exactly how to act.
Yeah, I want to talk about underground fences. Very popular now with people putting underground fences in their front yards, right? It used to be when you and I'm not going to include Michael, but you and I, when we were growing up, Art, where were the dogs? If you had, they were in the backyard, fenced in, right? A barrier. Well, now we have these underground fences where it will keep the dog in, right? But it also allows for children in the neighborhood to come on somebody's property, or the power company personnel has to come on the property. And we see incidents all the time where dogs are biting people that come on their property. Well, the owner's like, look, it's my property. My dog can roam around on our own property. Well, that is true, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be held responsible if your dog bites somebody from somebody coming onto your property, because here's the deal. All these workers, yardmen, utility people, power company people, all these workers, cable company people, they have what we call implied permission. Sometimes they have express permission to come onto your property to do the job that they need to do. And because they have permission to come on your property, if they get attacked or bit by your dog, you may wind up being responsible for it. So going back to what Michael's saying is know your dog, know kind of their personality. If you have an underground fence, you've really got to watch your dog, especially if you know that they have some vicious propensities, because there are circumstances where you can be held responsible.
And Carter, I have to ask this question to you and Mike, because someone at home is thinking about this. A dog is charging after me, the dog is loose, and it's a vicious dog, it looks like a vicious dog, and instead of letting that dog hurt me, I killed that dog.
I wasn't expecting that one, Art.
I know.
Well, that's a very good question. And the fact is, obviously you have a right to defend yourself. And if a dog is putting you in a situation where you are in fear of grave bodily injury or death, then you have the right to defend yourself in that situation, to stop that from happening, just as you would with anything. But it's going to go to what your state of mind is in that situation, and it's going to depend on the circumstances, certainly, of what kind of dog it was. But that has happened. Trust me.
And the intent may not have been to kill the dog. It was just protecting yourself. You had a walking stick, and you just.
And obviously, if that were to happen, you're not going to have a claim because you remedied the situation before you were attacked. The question becomes, are you going to be held civilly liable or criminally responsible? It goes back to the factual circumstances. I think it depends on whether or not you truly were in fear of bodily harm or death as a result of the dog. It would depend on the type of dog, a lot of different factual circumstances. But the reality of it is that we have a law in Alabama that says you're really only entitled to get the fair market value of the dog. In other words, what it would cost to replace that type of dog. So there's really not a lot of value there. But again, it would go back to the circumstances.
I know, tough question, but had to ask it. Someone's at home thinking about that.
That's right.
In fact, someone in the studio talked about that. Michael, thank you. It's always good to have you, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
And always good to have you with us when you join us here on The Attorneys. And you can stay in contact throughout the week on all the social media platforms, on X, on Instagram, and also on Facebook. And we would love to have you back with us next week for another edition of The Attorneys, same place, same time.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.